Broadcast is now starting. All attendees are in listen-only mode.
Good morning. Welcome to How to Motivate and Manage a Remote Workforce, something we're all getting used to right now. And there we go. A couple of housekeeping items before we get going. We have everybody muted so we don't have any background noises. We know now more than ever there's dogs and kids at home, so you don't have to worry about that. We've got you covered. However, there is a chat window for questions, and if you have a question, I will, in between slides, ask the question as moderator to our speakers today. So go ahead and queue them up, and we will get you some answers in between slides. Please interact with us. There are no polls today that we will be posting, but again, if you have a question, feel free to send it or share an experience, and we'd love to hear it. Contact information will be provided at the end of this webinar. So on the very last slide, if you want to get more information or chat a little bit more with LambTech, you'll be able to get those information at the end of this. And then we will send a link to the recording. We know that you're spending time with us today, but you might find it valuable and want to share it with somebody else, or there might be something that you hear that you might want to listen to again. So without further ado, I'd like to hand it over to Doug. Good morning, Doug. How are you?
Good morning, Pete. I'm doing well, and welcome to our conversation piece here for this month. And I'm Doug Sokolowski, the account manager for LambTech. So we do welcome you and thank you for your time, especially for today and during our webinar. We give you a little bit of a history of how LambTech came about. This year we're celebrating our 21st year. We were founded by Robert Lamb in 1999 in Sedalia. Robert still serves as our owner today. If you're not familiar with us, we provide managed services for business and organizations with our core coverage area lying between Kansas City to Columbia, up north towards the Brunswick area, and then in Springfield. Little note, we do service other states and regions as well. We have several multi-state companies that we take care of, and LambTech aligns IT solutions with your growth initiatives, and our overall goal is to take care of your technology so you can focus on your day-to-day business and stop expanding your problems. And we offer managed services to maintain things like security, your help desk support, consulting, and data recovery and backup services. One other note before we introduce our speaker, for those of you that are joining us that are current clients of LambTech, we do appreciate your partnership and appreciate you listening in here today. We do believe that you'll learn more about protecting your business and how we can assist with that, and also especially during this time when a lot of people are working remote, and maybe this has struck up the conversation of how you can remote work in the future. If you have questions on what you learned today and how it works with your specific agreement, feel free to reach out to our team after the webinar is complete. Some of you may have joined us in our webinars in the past. We do appreciate you rejoining us here today. Past few weeks, many of you have been or are working from home, and this has led to that discussion that we talked about how to enable more to be able to work from remote locations, not only now, but also have this as an option in the future and continue to bring out the best in your staff and brand to your customers and clients. And there's many facets to consider, and today we're going to hear from one of our great partners on this subject, Michael DePalma, who's the Senior Channel Development Manager of Datto, who discussed more about remote working and working from home in general. Good morning, Michael.
Good morning. How are you?
Doing all right. How are you today?
Things are going well. Good as can be here. So thank you very much, and thank you for everybody for joining us. My name is Mike DePalma. I am the Senior Channel Development Manager for Datto. I'm just trying to take over controls here. All right. So I think this topic right now obviously is something that a lot of people are dealing with. Me personally, my job at Datto is I travel all over the world doing live presentations mostly, or going to industry events, or even going out to do lunch and learns and seminars and those type of things. So for me, the working remote part of things is actually not that much different than what my normal job is. I do, I'm out 100 nights a year in Marriott's all over the world. So, it's that part of it is not that difficult. But the difference between what we're all dealing with now is that I'm working from home, and I've got a 6-year-old and an 8-year-old who are currently doing school on different laptops and tablets and all those type of things, which makes it a lot more difficult, right? We're bouncing around. My daughter had gym class today. She's outside, and I have to have the laptop, so she's showing all that while I'm on phone calls. And so it's different. And so, we've spent a lot of time on our team kind of brainstorming ways to help out Datto in general. We're kind of putting together a playbook for our Datto employees. And so we thought this would be a good topic to go with today. Pete, I still don't have controls, I don't believe. Oh, yes, I do. So very briefly, what we're going to cover today is, a little bit of tips and tricks, things that we've discussed. So first and foremost, how to engage your employees while working remotely. It might sound simple, but, it is not something that really comes easily to a lot of businesses or to a lot of managers specifically, or business owners. Maintaining that strong culture or building it if it didn't exist. One of the things at Datto that we pride ourselves on is the culture and is the camaraderie. We're close to 2,000 employees worldwide, but it does still have that feel of a small business. And then for the managers on the call, how do you manage remotely? People that are going through different things, people that have strengths and weaknesses that maybe are easier to manage when you're talking about a face-to-face meeting. Now that it's remote, how do you go about doing that? And then ultimately, which is actually a different kind of way to look at things, is once you figure out your sweet spot and how you're going to successfully run your business remote, think about how you could help your customers out. I mean, look at what this webinar is all about. What LambTech is trying to do is to go out and help the small business community based on some of the ways that they've been able to do things. This gives an opportunity for you to show value to your customers and check in and say, hey, I'm just calling to check in on you. How are things going as you work remote? Here's some things that have been working for us. And so, it really builds that relationship. So let's start with the engagement aspect of things. What have other companies done? And what has Datto done, but what have we learned from other folks from increasing that motivation? Well, the typical thing, and we hear about it all the time, are those happy hours. Pete, I'm on a happy hour with him every Thursday with a bunch of vendors in the technology space. And when it first came about, I kind of thought it was, to be honest, a little cheesy. I'm going to go on a Zoom meeting and have a happy hour. Like, what is that going to look like? Everybody's going to be talking over each other. But now we've done, I guess, probably 4 or 5 of them, and I actually look forward to it. And they've been great. It is really good to see the people that you're used to seeing. Both if it's, we have some that are data related. We have some that are specific to my team. There's 7 of us. There's then the industry ones that we do. And, once you get into the groove of that, people will genuinely look forward to it. And you can tailor it to make it a theme. The Datto ones, we have an 80s party where people are dressed up as 80s clothes and all of these different types of things. There's trivia. There's those type of things. We also have, show your pet competitions and those type of things. And, the big thing about this is really making people feel like they're part of a team, right? Really feel like, hey, I'm actually getting closer with my coworkers, even though we're further apart. And it's interesting, but I actually do feel that way to some extent. But the real big piece of this with that engagement is the communication aspect of it. The communication of this is what we're doing. Because think about it. Anytime somebody's unsure of what's going on, they're going to fear the worst. Most people are not saying, okay, I don't understand what's going on, but I assume everything is great. I assume everything's going smoothly. So it is extremely important that as you talk about this, communicate. It doesn't even have to be on a meeting like this. It could be in an email string, but continuously communicate about what the company is doing, what we're doing to move forward, making sure that there's an open line of communication so it doesn't have to be in a group setting, letting people know that whoever that point person is at the company is there to answer questions. And it's okay to say you don't know. That's fine. But it's the communication of saying that everybody's on the same page here. And even if there's some uncertainty, it's something that everybody's working towards, and that's okay. So just open, honest communication is critical as you're talking to your folks. And so the idea here is keep things as normal as possible. If you do one-on-ones weekly, make sure you're still doing one-on-ones weekly. And I think it's important to do them via Microsoft Teams or Zoom or whatever you're using to be able to see each other. I was guilty of that in the past. We'd have team meetings, and obviously we were all working remote, and we'd be on Zoom, and I'd have my camera turned off because I'm sitting in a hotel room, maybe sitting on my bed, and I just didn't feel like anybody should see me. Now I've shifted that to where when I'm on one of these calls, I'm sitting at the desk in my office. And it goes such a long way to see the person that you're communicating with. So if you have a one-on-one, it's way better to have some sort of platform where you could see each other. It's just like the difference between email and a phone call, right? Things get lost. The little subtleties of conversation get lost if you can't see that person's face. If you have team meetings, team huddles, Monday mornings, keep those and keep the structure as similar as possible. It really does go a long way, and it does feel like, okay, we're still business as usual. I'm being appreciated, all of those type of things. That being said, we live in the real world, and you do need to be flexible. You got to be flexible in terms of times of the day. I've got 2 kids doing these schools. There's certain times that it's really difficult for me to make a call. Be flexible. We all understand that. Everybody is stressed out much more than, normally, not just from the working aspect of it, but from our personal lives as well. And it might not necessarily be as somebody with kids. It could be a vast, array of different reasons why you need to be flexible. But again, that goes back to that open and honest communication. If somebody says this is a difficult time, they should feel comfortable having that conversation with the team. I think it's extremely critical. Now, that goes into, right, the communication and the team meetings goes into building really that strong culture. And what do I mean by that? We are all guilty, and I hear this all the time of saying, you know what, I go on these meetings, I haven't even taken a shower yet, or I'm laying in bed. I was on a call recently. It was actually a happy hour with some industry folks, and there was one industry organization who had to have a talk with one of their employees because she was in sales, and she would be openly talking to her clients or prospects, talking about how, I'm in sweatpants right now, or I'm in this, thinking it's going to make that bond. But why would you do that remotely when you wouldn't do that in person? I had to do a blog for Datto, and I said, maybe it's because I've been working on the road, but I set my alarm every morning, even if I don't have meetings. I get up, I take a shower, comb my hair, put some pomade in my hair, dress like I normally would, and I'm at my desk answering emails, or if I have a phone call. It just increases your productivity, and people don't even realize it. And so, it just makes you feel good to get out of the shower, get ready, just like you're doing for work, right? Set up an office. Now, you don't have to have an office. I could tell you at my house right now, my wife's full-time also, and because I'm such a gentleman, I've given her the home office. So I'm actually in a room down in my basement, which is similar to an office, but it's not. I set it up like I normally would. I have my 2 screens going, and it does just go a long way. And I feel like that's one of the pitfalls that we're seeing. And again, it goes back to the culture. If you're a public-facing person and you're dealing with clients or even vendors, and you're trying to follow these rules, act the same as if you were in a real meeting. Why you wouldn't go to the office in sweatpants and a t-shirt, especially you wouldn't go out and talk to public-facing folks. Why would you do that remotely? It should be the same feel. All right. Now, this is the difficult part: managing your team remotely. It seems easy, right? It seems like, okay, I'm just going to open that communication line, but everyone that you're dealing with, again, is in a different situation, and it's very important to understand that. We could all be get to work on time and do all those type of things, but everybody's dealing with these situations differently. We have the homeschooling piece of things, which obviously is what most people think are going to be difficult. But what about the people that don't have kids and maybe aren't married and just are working from home by themselves? And with this, location matters a lot too. If you're in a suburb or in a rural area and you're by yourself, you can go outside, breathe fresh air, take a walk, do those type of things. we're in the suburb of Manhattan. I know a lot of folks that live in Manhattan, a lot of single folks that live in Manhattan. And imagine being in a small apartment by yourself all the time, and maybe you get to go take a little walk outside, but you're paranoid about that. I mean, you see Central Park is empty and all those places. Think about that existence in general. That is probably harder to deal with than being home with your family and dealing with all the homeschooling, right? So it's a different layer of stress. So if that's somebody that's working under you, it's important to understand that. It might seem like, oh, it's just great. It's a single guy, you know, he's got the apartment to himself. How jealous are you of that? Well, there's a lot of issues with that as well, and it can be very, very difficult to live in that scenario. The living space. Not everybody's got an office, like I mentioned. So it might seem like, hey, you got to set up shop, and here's where you're going to be. The truth is, a lot of people are doing this out of their kitchen. A lot of people are just maybe are doing it from their coffee table, and they're trying to set up things. And so, you know, that's another aspect of things. One of the things is making sure that they have the resources they need to do their job. And I know that could be difficult because you're remote, right? They're remote. This is actually a great place for a company like Lamtech to come in and say, okay, I need to make sure as much as possible my employees are going to feel like, hey, I could accomplish the same amount of work as I could if I was in the office. Right, so make sure those business applications are in place and they've got a secure system, and they've got access to O365 or whatever other applications you have. But they have to have some comfortability around that. So the living space really does matter. And so again, as you start to have those one-on-one conversations, a lot of times you've got to set the groundwork with this. Okay, tell me how you're dealing with it. And there's no right or wrong answers. Maybe we could have a conversation and I can give you some tips that have been working, but tell me where you're setting up shop right now. It's an important thing as a manager to know what their situation is, but also where are they going to be working from on a day-to-day. And then another thing that I just kind of added to this late is think about if you're a new hire during this time. I actually had to do training the first week of quarantine for a group of SDRs. So these are actually the sales development representatives, and these are the cold callers, which is a tough gig. Most of these are young kids really in their early 20s, one of their first jobs out of school, wanting to get into sales. Okay, you've got to make 70 dials a day. That's fine. I do those trainings. And as I'm getting off of that training, that virtual training, I'm thinking to myself, man, can you imagine being in this situation where now you've got a new job. You understand that the people you're calling on are in a weird situation, and you still got to do your job of making 100 calls a day to people that are stressing out, because that's your job. Now, think about that. It might not be a sales position we are looking at a new hire. A new hire in any scenario, they're already, trying to figure out and sift through the waters of what this job is going to entail. Now they're doing that remotely without somebody helping them. They do need a little more hand-holding, and that's not anything bad against them. I've seen that on my team. We have very qualified people that go out and they've got a great resume of being able to go out and present. They understand the technology industry, but the job that we're in, we're all remote. I talk to my boss once a month, really, so it's almost like we're little entrepreneurs. And so nobody wants to admit as a new hire that, hey, I'm lost here. I don't know what's going on, because you're a new hire, right? You're trying to impress people. But the bottom line is, if you were a new hire and you were sitting in your office, you could poke your head over the cubicle and ask what you think might be a dumb question, and it's not a big deal. You're going to make those little relationships within the office, and that's going to help you kind of guide yourself. But there's a whole host of people who might have just joined your team in the month or 2 months prior to all of these issues going on. Those are the people that needed a little extra hand-holding, and they're not necessarily going to be forthcoming about the struggles that they're having. Because again, if you do have to make cuts at some point, the new hires are probably going to be the first ones, so they're very, very stressed out about that. So yes, if you're managing a new hire, have that conversation. Start the conversation with, let's start with 5 minutes of questions that you might think are dumb. Let's have those conversations right now. Make them feel comfortable. And then you then have to look at that new hire and where do they fit in? Do they have children? Are they one of those single people? Or do they have, what's their living space? There's actually 2 sales people at Datto who moved in together 2 weeks before all of this. Now imagine, these are young, I don't know, they're in their mid-20s or whatever, probably the first time they've lived with a significant other. Imagine that. Imagine being thrust into, hey, I'm going to live with this person, and we can't leave the house for the next 2 months. Important to know that, right? That's going to be something that they do. Also, you got to understand there's this misconception that, especially in my role, right? Oh, you guys travel all the time. You must have the easiest job ever. I'm actually busier now than I was when I was on the road. All of these things are now moving virtually. All of these things, I'm doing way more webinars, virtual events, we're planning and writing blogs. I'm much more busy than I was because it's newer work to me as well. So it's not something that I'm in a normal, it's going to take me a little longer to get into a routine. There's that misconception throughout all the industries that, you're working remote. This is easy. Most people are busier than they ever. My wife is in marketing, advertising. She is way busier than she was because now she's in digital advertising, everybody's shifting over there. So, understand that. People are not, just because you don't know exactly what they're doing from 8 to 5 every day, understand that for the vast majority of these folks, they're actually busier than ever. And so understand that. So start talking about workload management, work-life balance, those type of things. Understanding that as a manager is critical. Now, you're doing all of these things. That's fantastic, right? You're trying to understand that. But the bottom line is there are underperformers. The problem is trying to figure out why they're underperforming. Just the same as when you're in the office, right? There's folks that you have problems with. They need more hand-holding. Maybe they do have they're not organized. They don't have a great work ethic that just comes innately to them, and they need a little more hand-holding. Maybe there's somebody that's been at the company for 20 years and just kind of got fat and lazy. We see that all the time. So it's critical to, understand their living space, understand their living situation, understand what their roles are, open communication. But you also have to manage, and you also have to make sure that everybody's performing up to their potential. And so part of that is for several different things. Maybe they are just feeling the pressure of things, and their work is suffering because of their living situation. That's one thing. So have that conversation. How do you do that? Again, that's where that open and honest communication comes in. But when I mean open and honest communication, that also means having that difficult conversation and saying, hey, look, I know things are difficult, but you're falling behind here. We're still a business. We're still trying to keep our doors open. So we need you to do X, Y, and Z. That open communication isn't always just rosy news. It has to be honest on both sides. One of the things that I've found, which is kind of interesting, is one of the ways that people kind of work and understanding why they are struggling. Because a lot of people, we're social animals. And so part of the day-to-day job is, everybody does it. You have that water cooler talk when you're at the office, right? Maybe they're in break, you have some conversations. Maybe if you're in sales, you make a bunch of calls, you go and you have a 5-minute conversation about sports or whatever it is. And so understanding that people really need that is critical. I text more with my team now than I ever did before all this happened. We might text every once in a while, but there's some work related stuff, but it's also just, sending somebody a GIF or a meme or something funny, or, having a conversation about a funny call that you had, and it's just a quick text. But try to replicate that. A lot of times people that need that face-to-face, they start suffering because they don't have it. Again, that goes back to the person who might be just single and living by themselves, or the people that do have a whole family, but they look forward to those relationships that we have. Same thing with the new hires, making them feel included. So it doesn't have to be as formal as let's set up a Zoom meeting and a happy hour and things like that. It can be, you're managing a team, have a separate text thread where you don't talk about business. And it will definitely let them understand that you are trying to understand them and you're trying to reach out to them. That really is important. And it doesn't have to, again, be something formal where, hey, every day at noon we're going to have lunch together, and that's fine. It can be just something very simple. All right, I know you like, the Blues. It stinks that, the season's over right before the playoffs and all these different types of things. Have them shoot them an article that you read, something like that. So anything that pops into your head, replicating that water cooler talk is critical. And then when you're dealing with these things, again, make sure those one-on-ones are happening, that open communication, so they know if they're struggling that, yeah, we got to figure out why. Is it because you're procrastinating? Is it because you feel alone, or because maybe you don't have the resources you need? You've got to uncover that. And it might take a couple of those conversations to crack that shell. And then once you do, now all of a sudden if this person, one of the reasons they're struggling is because just emotionally they just feel down because they're lonely, because they don't have that connection, and because that was how they succeeded, is just feeding off of other people's energy. Let's figure out a way to make sure they feel included on that. And then, sharing these experiences with your clients. One of the things that we get lost in a lot is, it's stressful and all of these things, but let's be honest, if you're on this call right now, we are one of the lucky ones, right? I mean, there's 16 million people filed for unemployment. It's good to remind people of that. Yeah, things are difficult. Things could be a lot worse. And, when you're having these conversations, let's look at these things as a blessing, that we live in a world where we can work remotely. Think about if this happened 20 years ago. We couldn't be on this webinar right now having this conversation. You wouldn't be able to operate, most likely, if it was in the pre-internet world. Things are very bad. I'm a glass half full person. So we are the lucky ones to some extent. And so people feed off that positivity. It's very easy to get into the downward spiral and figure out how difficult it was. As I was putting this deck together yesterday, it wasn't a very good day in the DePalma household. There's a lot going on with the kids and all these different types of things. Not a great day. So for me to put the rosy picture on it, but then you take a deep breath and you say, you know what? Things could be so much worse right now in my life. What am I complaining about here? They are difficult, but I'm blessed to be able to still have a job, to be able to figure these out, to still share experiences like this. When you're dealing with your clients, that positivity will come across over the phone, or come across as you're having a Zoom conversation or any kind of video conversation with them. It will come across with your employees. So share the successes, share the funny stories that you have. It's extremely critical, and one of the ways that you could really differentiate yourself for the industry. So with that, I think, Pete, we're going to maybe open it up to some questions or ideas. If anybody's got cool stories, I'm all ears. I'd love to hear them.
Okay. Well, questions out there? Yep. Any questions out there that people want to go, or can raise your hand, or
Doug, Pete? You got any stories on here? Is there anything you want to add to it? I mean, I could add some more examples to kind of get the conversation started, but I'm very curious to hear some of the pain points that people on this webinar might be feeling, or maybe you saw something in my deck that you disagreed with. It's an old, I don't have the silver bullet. I wish I did.
I agree. You got to over communicate. I mean, we've been a remote workforce from day one of the company, so it's always been that way. So we learned to over communicate with the team, and operate independently, and realize that people work different schedules when they work at home based on what's going on at home. So
yeah. And I know Doug at LambTech. Oh, excuse me. Go ahead.
Yeah, I was going to say, I'll echo your sentiments that it's very important, and I would agree with you that it's interesting to see how much we are communicating now amongst our staff through things like Teams, also through networking. I've been quite impressed with the amount of people for chambers and things like that. I've been using Zoom just to have their weekly networking events. And like you said at the very beginning, at first you're kind of like, oh, how is this really going to work? You're never going to be able to get a word in edgewise because you're going to be amongst 20, 30, 40, 50 people, whatever the case may be. And then before you know it, you're able to network right afterwards. I can say personally, for my end of things, for LambTech, I've been able to actually add on to some of our conversations that we've had when we go to those networking events, and people now finally even get a little bit more about what we do at LambTech, where when you meet in person, sometimes you can't quite convey that message because they say, okay, the speaker is ready to start now, and then the whole conversation becomes quiet, And through networking, it seems to be working out really a lot better now that you can convey that and have even more interaction. Different, but still very pertinent.
Sounds like Erica.
Yeah, I mean, you guys.
Yeah,
Okay.
No, I was just going to say Erica she just shot in some comments that echoes that Zoom and the Teams and more contact, and she made a point that for their staff, they went around and they dropped off bags of things for people, and that was really cool. People really enjoyed it. So.
Yeah, we had a free lunch Friday where everybody got a $20 Uber Eats gift card, and then you can go on to Zoom and you eat together. And actually, it was pretty cool. Our founder jumped on the call as a surprise guest, and I saw our CEO, and it was cool to see how our CEO was set up. And he got made fun of because he had an IKEA bookshelf behind him, those plastic bookshelves. But it was just cool to see. And for you, Doug, LambTech is in a unique position just based on the industry that you're in, right? I mean, you're used to servicing your clients remotely. And so, I'm sure you got thrown into a situation because it all happened pretty quickly where, hey, how do we do this? How do we set up technology-wise and get, the endpoints protected and all these things as people work remote? And then from there, then you're a great resource to help some of your clients just settle in. I mean, how much consulting have you guys done in terms of helping your clients set up shop remotely?
Well, we did initially where really our whole team all got together and talked with all our individual clients to figure out, hey, are you going to be working remotely? Before all the stay-at-home orders even occurred, we were kind of ahead of the game trying to help out people as much as possible and able to make things pretty seamless for those that were quickly thrown into it. Like, maybe, we had some clients that, only a handful were able to work remotely before. And then after the stay-at-home order, we were able to kind of expand that a little bit for some of our clients. So, yeah, we did consulting and things like that, and I can even say even on my normal sales calls, a lot of it is nurturing and just seeing how you are more than anything else. We're just seeing, hey, how are you working with particular tools, whether it be any of the communication tools that we mentioned or others. It's just important to see how things are working for you, because we know when you're at home, you're in a totally different environment. None of us have probably the bandwidth that you have in the office. I always find patience is kind of the cue, because, if your home provider goes down, what happens? Well, a lot of us don't have that backup, but you can still at least work with your cell phones and things like that. And then once it comes back up again, you're back up and running. So I can even say just before my webinar, my net went down for about 2 minutes, and it's like, well, we're going to get ready to get going into this. But we made it into it, Michael, so we were good.
Yeah, I mean, it happens to me for some reason in my house, because we've got all the different, my wife and my 2 kids on tablets. At about 1 o'clock every day, my internet will go out. It's like clockwork. I don't know if it's just too much stress on it. And so, yeah, I think, again, it goes back to assume that it fails. What happens next? What happens next? You can't use it as an excuse of, hey, internet's down. It's like having a snow day now. I don't have to do any work, But again, setting those expectations that, yeah, if you're in sales, let's be honest, if you had some sort of quota, it's going to be very difficult. So those conversations should be things like this, right? Let's have a conversation about how you're working remote, right? I've got some expertise on it. That's what I do. That's what I've been doing for the last 5 years. Let's just have a chat about that. I think that's extremely critical, and I know Doug, you and your team do a great job at that.
I appreciate that, Michael. So, Pete, did we have any other questions or comments?
No, that was it.
Okay.
So,
Michael, any final thoughts here before we wrap things up?
No, I mean, hopefully this was helpful. If anybody does have any other ideas or wants to have conversations, I think they'll get a recording of this, and feel free. I'm willing to talk to anybody in any industry just to bounce ideas. But hopefully that you got some things out of this, and it'll return to normalcy at some point. I don't know what normalcy will look like, but it'll return at some point, God willing, knock on wood. But that's about it on my end.
And that's what we all hope for. And then also today, just to continue educating things, is that if you're considering working remotely, even after you go back to that normalcy and have that capability, and we'd be glad to help out with that. So thank you to Michael DePalma from Datto for his expertise today. We appreciate your time today to learn about working from a remote location. And again, if you're a current client and you want to see how what you learned pertains to your agreements, or maybe you just have some questions, we'll be glad to talk with you. Feel free to call us after the webinar. And if you're wanting to learn more about what we offer at Lam Tech, you can give me a call directly at 660-851-7342. And you can also learn even more at lamtech.com. Again, thank you for your time, and hope each of you have a fantastic day.